Okay. So my name is Danae Esser. I am the Training and Engagement Manager at the Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center, and we're excited to offer our virtual Spark Session series with you all. These sessions are always free and a space for us to share important and timely resources with residents. Today, our topic is Heat Pumps 101, Comfort, Savings, and Sustainability with the Indianapolis Office of Sustainability. They're going to cover what heat pumps are, how they work, and their benefits, payment options and available incentives, and tips on finding the right contractor. And you'll also hear some real Hoosier experiences. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter for this evening, Bronwyn Meldrum. She is an IU student working towards a dual master's in environmental science and public affairs. She's currently working with the Environmental Resilience Institute as a McKinney Climate Fellow. Welcome, Bronwyn.
Thank you so much, Janae. All right, let me share my screen. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, so like Janae said, I'm a McKinney Climate Fellow working with the Indianapolis Office of Sustainability. And I'm here to talk to you guys about heat pumps. We will get into it. What we hope you take away from this is kind of the knowledge about heat pumps and the confidence to ask for a heat pump next time your HVAC needs to be replaced, or to be proactive and look into replacing it with a more efficient heat pump to start saving energy sooner. Um, so um, this presentation is for you, so if you have questions, keep them in mind. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. But today we'll kind of go through a heat pump overview. Then I'll have a bit of a presentation from a local contractor, and then kind of go through a roadmap of next steps for if you are looking at changing over to a heat pump. We'll talk about some peer experiences from other people in Indianapolis who have switched over, and then, like I said, have time for that Q&A. So, to preface why the city cares about heat pumps and energy efficiency, it's important to understand the impact that heating and cooling buildings can have. Buildings are big emitters. They account for over 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Indianapolis. And while this presents a challenge, it also creates an opportunity for improvement. And space heating and cooling is the biggest user of energy in the home. Over 50% of average home energy consumption is used in keeping temperatures comfortable, which leads to a logical way to make a difference, right? We can reduce heating and cooling energy use through heat pumps, which will then lower our building emissions and get our community closer to our goals of carbon neutrality and clean air. So this is a really great way for us to move towards clean heat, for the city to meet its goals and also to help residents with their utilities, and their comfort. So how many of you guys have some sort of heat pump in your home? I'm willing to bet you all have heat pumps, at least some form of it, because your air conditioner and your refrigerator act as heat pumps to move heat out of your home or your fridge. So often when people think of heat pumps, they maybe think of geothermal, which is a great and reliable system, but is often impractical due to the investment of installing the infrastructure underground. So air source heat pumps are a great alternative that can replace your current furnace and your AC system. So this presentation is on air source heat pumps. So from here on out, when I say heat pumps, that's the kind that I'm talking about. So unlike other heating systems, the heat pump doesn't create heat. It just helps to move it, which is how it can achieve efficiencies greater than 100%. So if you look at the side of your furnace, it'll have usually a big yellow tag that says, if you're lucky, 98% efficient or 80% efficient. Heat pumps can get up to 300% efficiency because they're moving heat instead of burning fuel to generate it. So, in addition to working like a refrigerator or an air conditioner to cool your home in the summer, it can also switch the direction that it's pumping heat to warm your house in the winter. And there's just a little graphic on that it works both ways. So in the summer, it can cool your house down. In the winter, it can heat your house up. So it's a 2-for-1. So how does a heat pump move heat in and out? Just a little bit about the basics of heat. Heat moves from high to low, and hot and cold are relative. So that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking, how does a heat pump heat my house when it's really cold outside? And you may think it's cold outside when the thermometer reads 20 degrees, but to a refrigerant that's a liquid at negative 55 degrees, it's pretty warm out. So the heat will move from the cold air outside to the even colder refrigerant in your heat pump, and that will bring the heat inside. So if we want to do a little activity so that we don't have to talk about the ideal gas law to understand how this works, if you blow on the back of your hand, just with your mouth open, just kind of breathe out, it's warm, right? Because the inside of your lungs is warm and moist, so that's how the air is going to come out. But if you narrow your mouth and you blow a little faster, the air is cooler, right? That's how you're going to cool down your soup or your hot chocolate, right? And the reason for that is that as the gas comes out of your mouth, it expands and cools down. So the reduced pressure cools down the air, and heat pumps take advantage of this fact to cool air as it's coming into your house. And this is a little graphic of kind of what some of those parts of the heat pump look like and what they do. So it has a compressor and an expansion valve, and it reverses direction depending on if it's in heating mode or cooling mode. And we can go into that more if people have questions about it. But that's the more technical side, which isn't as relevant in your day-to-day use of a heat pump. So, just so you know, it's not just me talking about heat pumps. Heat pumps have been expanding all over the US, and they're very common in Europe and in the southern US, but they are growing as an HVAC system. So, it's been gaining traction in the Midwest over the past several years, and Canary Media has reported this year that sales of heat pumps in 2024 for the heating season outsold traditional gas furnaces for the third year in a row by the largest margin ever, almost 27%. So they are becoming very popular, and there are a lot of reasons for that. So the biggest factor is their efficiency, right? Heat pumps are 2 to 4 times more efficient than other heating systems because they use electricity to move heat rather than also having to use electricity or burn gas to create heat first. So this efficiency means that if you're switching from an already electric system to a heat pump, your utility bills will decrease and you'll save money, guaranteed. Since gas is cheaper than electricity right now, you likely won't see savings if you're switching from gas. But since electricity and gas prices are kind of unpredictable right now, there is kind of a future-proofing aspect to switching as gas prices are expected to increase in the future. But isolated from the utility and cost savings, electrification also results in better indoor air quality. So because you're avoiding burning fossil fuels in your home, you're going to have better air quality, fewer particulate matter, less particulate matter in the home, and you'll be able to breathe easier and lead to better health for you and your family. And heat pumps do tend to come with a higher price tag than a traditional furnace, but they do the work of two appliances since they work in reverse to cool your home as well. So you can have a heat pump instead of a furnace and an AC, you can just have one appliance, which is pretty great. So this visual kind of breaks down the different types of air source heat pumps, which if you guys have questions, we can come back to this and go a little more in depth. But if you've ever heard of a mini split, that is a ductless form of heat pump for homes that don't have a duct system in place. But there are also systems that work with existing ducts. So it's similar to a window AC unit versus a central AC. You can have ducts or non-ducted. And there's also a difference between cold climate listed and non-cold climate. So, like I was talking about how they've been used in the South a lot, where it doesn't get below 40 degrees, heat pumps, regular heat pumps work perfectly all the time, right? But up here it gets a little bit colder, and so they've developed cold climate heat pumps, which work down to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So they have increased the technology and improved it a lot to be able to create specific cold climate heat pumps that work in cold temperatures like Indiana and even farther north like Maine and Michigan. If you're a renter or know renters who may be interested, I also recently learned about portable window unit heat pumps, which are over here. So they don't come in cold climate form, but they are good for cooling in the summer and heating in fall and spring. And they're often advertised as a window air conditioner with heat. So if you don't own your home or don't want to do any actual installation, that is a potential alternative. So when shopping for heat pumps, you will see a lot of acronyms. But don't fear, they're just letters and they cannot hurt you. So HSPF2 is the updated heating seasonal performance factor, which measures the energy efficiency during the heating season. CR2 is the seasonal energy efficiency ratio, which does the same thing but in spring and summer, the cooling months. So EER is just the energy efficiency ratio, which is less common than SEER because it doesn't take into account that seasonality. But general rule of thumb for these is the higher the rating, the more efficient the system. So that's really what you need to know as far as these go, is just if you see a higher number following HSPF2, that means it's going to be more efficient than one that has a lower number. And Energy Star isn't its own rating system, but they have minimum efficiency requirements for systems to qualify. So if you see something that's Energy Star rated, that means you can trust that it at least meets this base specification for efficiency. And a lot of rebate programs, which I'll go into a little bit later, have thresholds of efficiency. So you want to make sure that you are getting a heat pump that's efficient, both so that you get the benefits of efficiency and also so that you can qualify for some money back. So now that you know some of the basics about heat pumps, I'm going to give you a break from listening to my voice for a bit to hear a portion of a presentation from Josh Elliott from Williams Comfort Air, a local contractor that he did a little bit earlier this year to learn a bit more about them from that perspective.
But we install a
So,
lot of heat
can you hear?
pumps. There's a push for electrification, both in automobiles and heating systems. And so that you're going to see it more and more as time goes on, that less and less air conditioners are going to be installed and more heat pumps are going to be installed. It's basically looks the same, it just does more. And so there will probably come a time where we don't see air conditioners being manufactured anymore. They'll all just be heat pumps. And that's not too far in the future. I've read a lot of articles and a lot of people are talking about that. So it's coming. So we all need to be prepared and ready for heat pumps for sure. Brown kind of already covered this, but what is a heat pump? What do you guys think? What does a heat pump do? Yeah, so a traditional heating system generates heat. It produces heat. A gas furnace burns fuel. You have a fire there creating heat. Or an electric furnace. You have heating elements that we put electricity into, and that electricity is converted into heat. And a heat pump doesn't generate heat. It just transfers heat from one place to another. So a traditional air conditioner, even if it's not a heat pump, is a heat pump. It's just transferring heat from inside your house to outside your house through the refrigeration process. So a heat pump in the cooling cycle, it's essentially an air conditioner. It works exactly the same. You're taking, the warm return air from your house, blows over this coil here that's filled with cold refrigerant, and that cools the air off and it puts cold air back in your home. That refrigerant absorbs the heat from your return air, and it takes it back out to this outdoor unit where a fan blows over it and it blows all that heat outdoors. And there's compression in there. In order to get the refrigerant warm enough to reject heat into the air, if the air is 90 degrees outside, we have to get that refrigerant above 90 degrees in order to reject heat into 90-degree air. So that compressor squeezes down that refrigerant, which boosts up the pressure, and the pressure-temperature relationship, when one goes up, the other goes up. So we raise the pressure up of that refrigerant. Come on in and have a seat. And that gets the temperature of it very high. So it'll get up 140 degrees out there, and that will easily reject heat into 90-degree air if it's 140-degree refrigerant. So that's all the heat from your house. We just pressurize it, and that way you can release heat. And then it goes back inside where we lower the pressure down, which lowers the temperature, and then that refrigerant is now suitable to absorb heat from the house. And in the heating cycle, we just flip that around. So air conditioner is like a car that doesn't have reverse, and a heat pump's like a car that can go forwards and backwards. It's really just going the opposite direction. We're absorbing heat in a different place. So like an air conditioner, a heat pump is a machine that transfers heat. In the summer, it takes heat from inside and pumps it outside, and in the winter, it takes heat from outside and pumps it inside. That's a pretty basic description of what it does. So this is a picture of a couple of units in our training lab back at our headquarters one is an air conditioner. And you can see they're very similar, very similar. Does anybody know which is the heat pump? She's saying right.
No, I say left.
You say left. No. Okay. All in favor of this one? All in favor of this one? It's actually that. And the only way you can tell, because they're almost identical, is it's sitting up on legs. So heat pumps, we set them up a little bit. Some people call those snow legs. It gets it out of the snow level. They also condensate during the winter, so water drips off of that during the defrost cycle. It'll frost up, and we got to defrost them, so it's got to be up so that the drainage can get out. But other than that, they look pretty much the same, an air conditioner and a heat pump. Down inside of a heat pump, you'll find this one part that's different than an air conditioner, and that's called the reversing valve. And that's actually the part that changes the direction of the refrigerant. So it'll slide it one way for heating, that thing will slide over and push it out the other pipe for cooling. It just changes the direction of which way the hot gas is going to go. We're going to push the hot gas inside, or we're going to push the hot gas outside. Other than that, most of these parts are very similar to an air conditioner. Yeah?
And this is still done with the thermostat in the house. You switch the heat, switch the cool, set your degrees.
You don't have to touch any of this stuff. Yeah, just all you do is touch the thermostat, and it all does it by itself. But I'll show you a little bit more about that reversing valve here in a couple of slides. But just in general, to understand how these work and how heat transfers, does anybody know what is heat? I said, what is heat? What would you say?
Thermal energy.
Yeah, form of energy. Who said that?
Thermal.
Hey, that's not you can't. It's a form of energy, right? It's a form of energy. There's lots of different forms of energy. There's mechanical energy and light, and heat is just a form of energy. Electrical. A couple things about heat. Heat is a form of energy created by the motion of atoms or molecules. It's also known as thermal energy, and it's present in all matter. So everything has heat in it. And so when we start to think about how do we get heat pulled out of air that's 30 degrees outside, everything has heat in it. All matter has heat. So even ice has heat in it, and we can extract heat from ice. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how a heat pump works. Heat can be measured and accounted for. There is a difference between temperature and the amount of heat present. I'll show you a slide on that here in just a minute, but temperature is a measurement of the intensity of the heat, but it can be in a small area, whereas the amount of heat takes into consideration the size of what's being measured. Heat can be transferred from one substance to another, so we all know that. Heat travels from hot to cold, hot to cold. So I always ask my students when I'm in class, when we're first starting out, does heat rise?
Yes.
Trick question. I just told you, heat goes from hot to cold. Heat does not rise. Hot air rises though. So there's a difference. If we heat up air, yes, it's true. Yes, hot air does rise. Yes, your upstairs is probably warmer than your downstairs. And we can help you with that if you need. But heat goes always hot to cold. Hot to cold is where heat wants to naturally go. And so if it's 30 degrees outside and your house is 70 degrees inside, which way does the heat naturally want to go? Outside. And so how are we going to take heat from 30-degree air and pump it into 70-degree house and heat that house up? It's unnatural. And so that's what the refrigeration system does by pressuring and depressurizing refrigerant. Heat travels from warmer to a cooler place. All right, so this is a slide to maybe explain temperature a little bit better. On the right, we have a boiling pot of water. Does anybody know what temperature water boils at? 212 degrees at sea level. So assume we're at sea level, water boils at 212 degrees. And this is the ocean. So does anybody know the average temperature of the ocean? I had to look it up. It's probably a lot colder than you think. 45 is close. 39 degrees is the average temperature of the ocean. That's pretty cold, but you think about how deep it is, and then the water at the poles is obviously going to be very, very cold. But so which has more heat, 39-degree ocean or 212-degree pot of water? The ocean has way more heat content in it, even though it's not as hot. This has more the temperature's higher. it's got more heat intensity, but because it's so small, it doesn't have a lot of heat compared to an ocean, which is, millions and millions of gallons. And so if you think about that, a heat pump, we're pulling heat out of the air. The air is limitless, right? There's tons and tons of air outside, an atmosphere to pull heat from. And so no matter what the temperature is out there, there's always plenty of heat to pull from. Questions? All right. All right, I won't get too technical, but I did want to kind of show you how that system works. This is that reversing valve that I showed you there. And you got the four major components of an air conditioner or a heat pump. You got the compressor, which compresses the gas, and it just sends it in a cycle. There's two coils, an indoor coil and an outdoor coil. And those, if we're talking about air-to-air heat pumps, have fans that blow over them to get the heat to transfer. And this is just kind of a picture of what that looks like in your home. You have your furnace or air handler here, which has a blower in it that blows the air through your ducts. Then there's a coil sitting on top or somewhere in your system. And that's where the refrigerant goes, and it goes in a cycle to the outdoor unit, and that refrigerant goes back and forth. And if it's in heat mode, then that reversing valve takes the hot gas from the compressor, which is down inside the unit, and it pushes it, and you can see this little canoe, we call it, is slid over this way on that reversing valve, and that's going to force the hot gas to the indoor coil. And so that compressor would push hot gas into your indoor coil, and we can blow air over that, and that will heat your home. And then it goes back around, it comes out of that after it rejects heat into your ducts, and so it cools off. That cooler refrigerant goes back out to the outdoor unit. It hits an expansion valve, and we drop it even lower pressure, which drops the temperature down so that it's colder than whatever the outside air is, and then it can absorb heat outside and come back inside. The reversing valve loops it back around into the compressor, and around it goes. And so if we switch that reversing valve to the other side, that little canoe just slid over this way, we put it into cool mode. Now the hot gas is forced to the outdoor coil, and the cold one is inside. That's all it did, it just reversed the flow so that we can absorb heat now outside, or inside, and reject it outside. Questions? All right, a few things about heat pumps. One is heat pumps become less efficient as temperatures outside get colder. So they're not invincible. As it gets colder outside, you may feel the air get a little bit cooler coming out of your registers. And there's a stigma about heat pumps, especially like back in the 80s when they started first getting popular. People didn't like heat pumps and they got a bad name. But it's come a long way since then. The controls are a lot better. You'll hear people say, I don't want a heat pump. The air coming out of the registers is just, it's not very hot. It feels kind of lukewarm. We've come a long way with that. It's a lot better than it used to be, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But heat pumps do become less efficient as the air gets colder, and the air coming out of your registers will get a little bit cooler as it gets colder outside. In colder climates, auxiliary heat is often needed. So you got to have some type of backup heat if you're in a cold climate. Florida, maybe not, but Indiana, it gets pretty cold here, and so that heat pump, after it loses, it's not very efficient anymore, it's not putting out enough heat to heat the house, you're gonna have some type of backup heat. So you can have electric backup heat, or gas, or propane, or some type of heat to kick in those times where you're gonna need it. Yeah?
Could you technically explain why it's less efficient in cold?
Well, there's less heat to pull from outside, and that's, that drops the pressure of the refrigerant, changes the whole refrigeration cycle. Yeah, it's just because it's colder out there, it has to work a lot harder, and it's just not producing as much.
Actually, the unit I have has electrical coils, so when it's really cold weather, it kicks in as electrical coils.
Electric, yeah, absolutely.
So you don't have to go to propane, you don't have to go to natural gas, you just use one unit.
Yeah, that's probably the most common type of backup heat is electric heating coils. Yep. But
that's only in really cold weather.
Yeah, typically, like in Indiana, your heat pump will cover 70% of the heating season, and 30% you're going to need some type of auxiliary. And that's depending on your comfort level and how we set the controls up. Some people, they just don't want to feel it get too cold at all, and so they'll kick on the auxiliary heat sooner. So just kind of depends, but typically I'd say on average 70% of the time, you know, it's mild out, it's 40 degrees out, you don't need any auxiliary heat. But when it gets down to 20 or below, or you know, it's really cold, yeah, that auxiliary heat's gonna run more and more. But the goal is to keep the heat pump running as much as possible because it's so much less expensive to run a heat pump than it is any type of auxiliary heat. Most common heat pumps will need some backup heat around 30-35 degree outdoor temperature is when a common heat pump will kick on the auxiliary heat. Cold climate heat pumps are able to heat a home with little or no auxiliary heat using inverter technology. So I read a study about a cold climate heat pump they installed in Michigan, northern Michigan, and they ran it for two heating seasons with no auxiliary heat at all. Just the heat pump ran the whole time. That's pretty cool. We do have cold climate heat pumps. Carrier, we're a Carrier dealer, and Carrier has a couple of our VNA line of heat pumps, our cold climate heat pumps. They can work down to -22 degrees and still be pretty efficient. Still need some auxiliary heat with those, usually about 10% of the season. You'll need some type of auxiliary heat with the inverter ones, but they're just much more efficient. The inverter, what that means is that the compressor, it's variable. So it ramps up and down. It ramps up and down, and the fans, the blower on the inside and the condenser fan motor, they're also variable. And so by changing the amount of refrigerant flow and changing the fan speeds, we can manipulate it a lot more and get more and more heat out of it. A little more about auxiliary heat. So, like I said, your heat pump can be paired with electric backup heat or gas. So this is an electric furnace. We call it an air handler. It's got the indoor coil there. It's got a blower up here, and then electric heat banks can be installed up here to be the auxiliary heat. So the heat pump would be the primary source where this coil gets nice and hot, but then after the auxiliary heat comes on, electric heat banks would kick on up here. With a gas furnace, the heat pump would run primarily, and then you have a balance point set, some outdoor temperature where once it gets below that temperature, the heat pump shuts off and the gas furnace takes over from that point until the temperature outdoor gets back above your balance point. But you compare it with oil furnace. Anybody have an oil furnace? So we're getting few and far between in this market, but oil, LP or propane, you compare it with pretty much anything. I just want to touch on, Brown talked about CO2 and HSPF. I want to talk about one efficiency acronym here, and it's COP. And I think this one is the easiest to understand when you're talking about efficiency, and that stands for the coefficient of performance. And what that is it's a comparison of how much energy you're putting in versus how much heat you're getting out. So if you just look at an electric air handler, and that's what the electric heat strips look like. It looks almost like a toaster, and that slides in there, and then the air blows over that. Those start to glow orange when they're on, and they're getting very hot. That is technically 100% efficient. Now, it doesn't mean it's inexpensive. It just means that 100% of the electricity that goes into electric heaters gets converted into heat. 100% of the electricity gets converted to heat. There's no waste. There's no heat leaking out somewhere else. So that is a COP of 1. 1 unit of energy in, 1 unit of heat out, no loss. Well, a heat pump has a COP anywhere from upper 2s, 3s, all the way up to 5 on some of these cold climate heat pumps. And that means that they're 300 to 500% efficient. Meaning that for every unit of electricity we put into that, we can get 3 to 5 units of heat out. That's because we're not generating heat. It's not generating any heat, it's just transferring heat. So we're stealing heat from one place and putting it somewhere else. And so that's where you really, really get efficient. So if you look at that COP number, that means 300%. And it's always a comparison to electric resistance heat, electric strip heat. Electric strip heat being 1, and anything with a 3 is going to be 3 times that, or 300% more efficient to 500% more efficient. So that's the magic of heat pumps.
So do you find the air conditioners are also that efficient, the 3 to 5% more? Well, what would you compare it to? I don't know.
Yeah, you're not really comparing it to
No.
heat, but air conditioners are super efficient as well, even more efficient than the heat pumps, like the cooling mode in some of the newer air conditioners with inverters. Yeah, the SEER ratings are just through the roof now on these air-to-air systems. But yeah, yep. So are heat pumps more efficient than other HVAC systems? So you kind of got to look at a few different factors, but traditional HVAC systems like gas furnaces or air handlers with heat strips typically operate by generating heat through combustion, like a gas furnace is combustion. These systems generally have an efficiency rating of around 80 to 98% for gas furnaces. So on a gas furnace, there's always some heat that's wasted. So we'll start a fire in the furnace, and 80% of that, up to 98% of the heat that's produced, will go into the house. And then there's 20% to 2%, somewhere in that range, of heat that's wasted. Does anybody know where that heat goes?
Up the chimney.
Yeah, up the chimney, up the flue pipe. So there's always some flue gases, all that bad carbon monoxide and everything that has to go outside. Well, that takes a lot of the heat goes with that to take that outside. So with a gas furnace or any combustion fuel burning appliance, you're always going to have waste. You're always going to have some heat that's not used to heat the house. So 98% efficient. That's crazy. So that's very, very efficient for a gas furnace. And that means that 80 to 98 cents of every dollar spent goes to actual heat. And then it's 100% again for electric resistance heat, although it takes a lot more energy to heat your home with electric strip heats. And this is a very expensive way to heat your home. So if you had electric strip heat without a heat pump, your heating bills would be through the roof. We see that with people that call in on a service call that have a heat pump, and they say, I don't know what's going on, our heating bills just went up to $700 a month. They're normally $250. We'll go out there, and what has happened is the heat pump has quit working. The auxiliary heat just takes over to make sure that the house is heated, but the heat pump isn't even trying because it's broken, something's wrong with it. And it really just, the electric meter's out there whizzing. So, heat pumps, by contrast, move heat rather than generate it, allowing them to achieve efficiencies of 300 to 500% under favorable conditions. And again, they're always more and more efficient when the temperature outside is warmer. They're going to be more efficient.
All right. So I think it helps to hear things in different ways. So hopefully one of our explanations resonated with you guys. So we're going to move into a bit of a heat pump roadmap and explore potential next steps for you. So heat pumps operate best in certain conditions. So just like a hot drink stays hotter in an insulated mug than in a paper cup, heat pumps are going to perform best in a well-insulated space. So this is where we're going to get into the steps of making a major energy efficiency upgrade like a heat pump. So this is first going to begin with something called an energy audit, which I'll talk about in a second. And that's going to inform any weatherization measures to be taken to ensure that heat leakage, which is the escape from heat from the conditioned space, is kept to a minimum. And that can be done on a scale that varies from air sealing to adding insulation to replacing your windows. So kind of depends on how old your house is and what you're willing to invest. But that can be really important before you upgrade your system, and we'll talk about that in the next few slides. So, do any of you have drafty rooms in your house or room areas that don't get as cool or as warm as the rest of your house? Because if so, you likely need to improve your weatherization. And an energy audit is going to take place before weatherization, and weatherization is going to take place before a home efficiency upgrade. So an energy audit is the difference between guessing and measuring. Basically, an energy auditor would take measurements and perform certain tests to construct an energy profile of a space. And the data collected is then going to inform where weatherization can have the most impact and what can be done to mitigate things like heat loss. So AES Indiana, the utility company, does have resources to help with this. The first is a free virtual energy assessment, which is going to be much less thorough than a true energy audit, but will give you some ideas to start, and they may offer some free swaps and suggestions for instant energy savings. And for income-eligible households, they do offer free in-person energy audits, so good to check that out. Um, if you apply for the Homes in Here programs, which I'll talk about in a couple slides, they also do an energy audit as part of that program. So the energy audit steps helps avoid guessing, but it's not required. So if that's going to be a barrier for you for moving forward, you don't have to do an energy audit. You can just do some research to see common changes and fixes that you can make in your home, like replacing incandescent lights, finding places in your house where air is leaking. You know, if you feel by the edges of your window and it feels a lot colder in the winter, you can kind of tell, like, okay, maybe some window caulking would help keep the hot air in. And things like using a smart thermostat to avoid unnecessary heating and cooling. If you're gone all day, then you can automatically have it reduce your heat. So, weatherization and insulation are terms for improving how well sealed your home is. So, you have what's called a home envelope, which basically is how sealed is your house, how much heat is able to escape through cracks or through thin walls. So, like we said earlier, heat moves from high to low. So, if your house is nice and warm, that heat's going to try to escape to outside through whatever means it can. Um, so, sealing cracks, caulking windows, weather stripping doors, adding curtains or wall hangings, and increasing insulation are all fairly low cost ways to slow that heat down to keep your home comfortable without having to generate or pump additional heat, which saves you energy and money, right? You're already paying for that warm air, so don't let it out, right? You can't stop it, but you can slow it down a lot. And you'll want to do this before upgrading your HVAC system because it can actually lower your heating load. So the less heat that escapes your home, the less your system needs to work to keep up. So you can actually buy a smaller system to heat the same amount of space if your home is well weatherized. So many of you have probably already worked with contractors in the past, but some of you may not have a contractor that you prefer. Either way, don't be afraid to shop around and check out websites to see how comfortable the company is with heat pumps. One resource to use is on AES Indiana's Find a Contractor page, which has a directory of qualified contractors that they work with on energy efficiency rebates, which I'll go into more in a minute. Indiana Energy Saver also has qualified contractors, so if you apply for their program, they'll have suggestions for you as well. But I have the link down there for the AES qualified contractor, and we can send out these slides to you guys so you have that as well. And when you find a contractor that seems like a good fit, ask them about heat pumps, right? Even contractors that do install heat pumps have varying levels of comfort. So you may receive pushback if they want to go a more routine path of a traditional furnace just because that's what they do every day, so they're more comfortable with it. But don't be afraid to advocate for what you want and what you know is best for your house and for your situation right now, especially now that you're equipped with knowledge about how well heat pumps can work. You can advocate for yourself and say, no, I know about this and I want this for my home. So another thing to do is to look at rebates ahead of time to know what level of efficiency you need and to apply to see what you qualify for. And I'll talk about a bit about that. But you can take a pretty good chunk off of the cost if you kind of do some research and know what balance you want of how efficient, and generally the more efficient, the more expensive, but which rebates you can get and you know what kind of utility reductions in efficiency that you're looking for. So once you get the heat pump, the best practice is to set it and forget it. So heat pumps work best when they're allowed to maintain a steady temperature. So while you should adjust your traditional furnace when you leave for the day to save energy, which is what those smart thermostats can help with, unless you're going to be gone for more than 24 hours, heat pumps work great if you just leave them at a comfortable temperature for you. And then maintaining that yearly, having a yearly maintenance scheduled, which there are also rebates just for maintenance of heat pumps, which is great. So, as promised, how to pay for your heat pump. The sad truth is, heat pumps are generally more expensive than a traditional heating system. But because of all the benefits to you, the community, and the utility load, there are many incentives available to help you make that money back in addition to potential utility savings in the future. So, like I mentioned before, AES Indiana offers rebates for energy efficiency upgrades. And they also include, so that includes heat pumps and insulation. And they also provide free weatherization kits. So you can go on and request a kit, and they'll send you some things to help seal air and cracks in your home, which is great. And something about these rebates is that they are midstream, which means that if you use a qualified contractor on their website, they can actually apply for you and take that cost off your ticket price instead of having to apply and wait a few weeks to get the money back. So that's a really nice perk that the utilities offer because they want to reduce their load, right? There's a lot of strain on the grid right now, and so they are happy to have you use less electricity, which maybe seems counterintuitive because they get your money, but it's actually cheaper for them if you use less electricity. So there are also federal tax credits. This summer's new budget bill cut those short. So they were going to go till 2030, but now they are ending at the end of this year. So if you're thinking about whether you should upgrade before December or in February, do it before December because they will end at the end of December 2025. And this can reduce your taxes by up to $2,000 for the tax year that you upgrade your system. And then Homes in Here are state programs through the Indiana Energy Saver, which you should apply for before scheduling your heat pump installation. They started this summer and they're a little bit backlogged because it's such a great program, and so a lot of people are applying for it. So if you're considering it, I would recommend just applying. And then they'll kind of work with you on finding a contractor, getting that energy audit done. And based on your income and the projected energy savings, you can get a significant chunk of money back, up to 100% of the program of the project costs, depending on your income, but generally at least 50%, anywhere from $2,000 to $18,000 back, which is really great. And then another financing option is the Indiana Energy Independence Fund, or IEIF, and they sent us these slides to use. So they're a nonprofit helping Hoosiers access low-cost financing for energy improvement projects. They are mainly commercial right now, except in the northern part of the state, but they are hoping that by January of 2026, so the start of next year, they're anticipating being able to provide residential financing statewide. And so that involves very low rates for getting a loan for your energy efficiency upgrades. So that's a great option, and they have information on their website as well. So I put out a call for homeowners in Indianapolis to tell me about their heat pump experiences, and the feedback was very positive. I've thrown a couple quotes up on the slide here. But we also have Morgan with us, who is willing to share her experience installing a heat pump in her home. So Morgan, if you want to unmute yourself, you can introduce yourself. When you got the heat pump installed, tell us a bit about your system before and why you decided to switch, and kind of what you've seen in changes since in comfort level, air quality, general impression, any cost savings.
Awesome. Yeah. Happy to share. Um, so I we live on the Near East side of Indianapolis, in a pretty old home. It's about 100 years old. Um, and in 2022, um, our HVAC went out. And I was a little familiar with heat pumps and knew a thing or two about, energy efficiency. And so I recommended to my partner that we explore the heat pump as an alternative when we're looking for the replacement for our HVAC. And so we did do that. We ended up installing a dual fuel heat pump, partly because our home did have natural gas heat. We talked with a couple different contractors. Brown, your mention of varying level of familiarity, comfortability in recommending heat pumps was something that we experienced in Indianapolis. This was a couple of years ago, and so hopefully it's moves a little further along with these different tax credits and whatnot, though. But that's part of why we ended up with a dual fuel heat pump. We went off of the recommendations from the contractor. This was I think the third contractor that we spoke with. I remember one didn't recommend them at all, and maybe that's because of they're not familiar with the different types of heat pumps that you and the contractor explained. Um, so yeah, dual fuel heat pump. Basically, I think that's just that backup heat that he discussed, being natural gas instead of backup heat through with electricity. Um, so we honestly don't see that big of differences. And I think that is a solid testimony, right? Like that's what you want. Like we had a functioning HVAC that heated and cooled our home before. Once it gave out, we transitioned to the new and it heats and cools our home very well again. And so, yay, it does what it's supposed to do. Um, it's hard to tell the cost savings, though, I will say, because um, we went from gas heat. Now we're using primarily electricity for heating. And so it's not that like we saw that immediate um, savings, right? And natural gas is cheaper and all of the things that you factor in there. Unfortunately, I don't have a super nice graph to show you on our savings. Um, and I thought I was going to say something else, but I'll pause there. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone would like to ask me anything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Morgan. Yeah, I think that's pretty common that if you're switching from gas over, you won't really see much of a utility savings. But we had one person who mentioned that the heat pump increased their electricity bill in the winter just because they had been using gas before and then started using electric, but in the summer it was lower. So yeah, so you'll definitely see different things, but um, I'm glad that you've noticed it works well still. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
there is a question about selecting our contractor from AES. Yes, we did, and they were, if I remember correctly, they were able to just like offer the savings up front to us, because then on the back end they submit it and get it figured out. So we just kind of went to AES and was like, "This is the list of approved contractors. Let's start calling down the list." And maybe we cross-reference that with like recommendations from our neighbors. Typically, we go on the Facebook group and ask for contractor recommendations.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, if there are any other questions, we can, address those at the end too. Um, I just have a couple other slides here, just kind of about the myths with heat pumps. Josh had mentioned a few of them in his presentation that um, heat pump technology has come a long way. So, a lot of people have heard of heat pumps back from 20 years ago when they didn't really work, and so that's kind of a stigma that has held on a little bit. But they are much more effective now, even in cold climates. So all Energy Star certified heat pumps have a verified performance down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and many designed for cold climate can operate down to -15 or -22, like Josh was saying. So if it's in the single digits for weeks on end, a second heat source may be useful to stay comfortable, using a dual fuel like Morgan has, or having electric. So it's all electric if you don't have a gas hookup or want to remove gas from your home. So those are great solutions to ensure you always have enough heat, but you're still taking advantage of energy savings for the majority of the year. And like any big appliance installation, initial costs will be high. However, the savings over time can make it worthwhile depending on what you're switching from, especially if you take advantage of some of the funding options that are available. And also remember that it takes the place of both a furnace and an AC, so you're getting two appliances in one. So now we'll kind of go into if you guys have questions about air source heat pumps. I have another slide kind of just about like what now, right? So what are next steps for you if you're considering switching to a heat pump? And kind of those basic steps are stay informed, which check, you guys are here, so you're already doing that. Make the decision, find the right time for you to switch to a heat pump, whether you wait until your current system dies or is close to it, or you switch because you want something more efficient or more clean in your home sooner. And then, yeah, researching contractors, looking on AES Indiana website, asking friends, looking at reviews, and then ultimately deciding to make that switch to install a heat pump, save energy, just have that cleaner heat in your home, which has many benefits that we've talked about. So, thank you guys, and we'll move into the Q&A portion. So let me see if I can. You're welcome to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat, either way.
Hi, thank you. My name is Danita. I was wondering, are there multi-year tax breaks like for solar energy?
So it only applies for the year that you make the upgrade. So and they end this year. So unfortunately, it's not multi-year, but if you upgrade in 2024 for your 2024 taxes, or I guess in 2025 for your 2025 taxes that you file for in April of 2026, you will get that discount for the prior year. So, but it's not every year, it's just for those installation costs. But good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Albert. Great, great basic presentation. So thank you for that. I am an energy auditor, a HERS rater, uh, building science consultant, lead for home green rater, and so on. So I really appreciate you sharing this information with people because they're not aware. I did post on the Nextdoor forum about this. Hopefully, I was hoping more people would attend. But those myths that you mentioned are pretty pervasive. I mean, every time I talk about heat pumps, people say, oh, it's cold and blah, blah, blah. And they don't understand the coefficient of performance, that it's 300 to 400% more efficient. Uh, but what I wanted to say as an energy auditor, if you do not get an energy audit, well, in every case, you should ask your heating contractor to perform what's called a manual J or a heat load calculation. This is essential, especially in heat pumps. What they're going to do is they're going to do the math on your home and see, let's say in the wintertime, how much heat your home is losing and in each room. And you want a room by room heat load calculation is my suggestion. And this way they'll be able to know whether they need to modify the ductwork or what they need to do to really make it work for your home. And I will prepare you and tell you, I mean, as a professional, um, recommending homeowners get heat pumps, and I give them all the reasons, and then contractors dissuade them for the very reason that you mentioned, that they're not familiar. They don't want to risk, they don't want to learn, but really be assertive in your efforts to get a heat pump. One benefit that was not mentioned is that in real estate listings, there is a space where realtors can put uh, energy efficient appliances, and they can note that. And that we have found historically that anytime there's anything noted as an energy efficiency component to the home will sell for a higher price and sell quicker. And as much as nationwide 8% increase in value and sell in less than 30 days. I mean, in today's market, that's difficult to say how that's going to translate, but you do get the extra benefit of adding value to your home and decreasing your HERS rating. The HERS score will go down. So if you're looking for certification on your home in any way for any reason, that's something to keep in mind. And in addition to heat pumps, I would also recommend if you're going to replace your water heater to go with a heat pump water heater, which also very unfortunately expires at the end December 31st. Heat pump water heaters, especially, I don't have stock in any of these companies, but a Rheem Proterra hybrid water heater is really the way to go. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And an excellent point about increasing your home value too. That it's great for you while you live in the home and it's great for you while if you're moving later. So, um, that's excellent. Um, I've thrown a couple resources in the chat, for the information on rebates. I'll add a link as well. Um, so AES Indiana, if you go to their website, if you just look up like heat pump rebates, it'll link you right there, but I'll put it in the chat as well. Um,
Do you know, is the homes and the HERE program, do they have an accelerated expiration date in the current circumstances, current market?
so it's a state program, so it's unrelated to the federal budget bill that was changed. So they will continue that program until it runs out of money, basically, is how they're doing that. So for the foreseeable future, it is in place. They have several $1 million in funding that they're using for it. And then once it's gone, but they may renew it, but it's unrelated to the federal budget changes.
So do we have any other questions for Bronwyn? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. This has been a lot of great information. We really appreciate your time. Um, I know I learned a lot during the session. So again, thank you. And we record this session so that we can post it on our YouTube channel. So if there is someone that you know that you think would find a lot of value in this session, please feel free to share that out, and I will send that to you guys by Friday this week. So be on the lookout for that. And then I will also send out any slides or resources that Bronwyn wants to share with you all through email. So thank you so much, everyone.
I also included, I also included a link. This is the database of state incentives for renewable energy. It has every incentive, grant, rebate, state, federal, um, incentive that exists. So if you click on that link and you put in Indiana in your county, you will see every option, which includes the $1,200 a year tax credit. That's, as far as I know, this year, next year, and so on. So anyway, it's a great resource.
Danita, you have your hand raised too.
I do. I'm sorry. I was trying to enter it in the chat, but it wouldn't go through. I just wanted to know if a person started the process in this calendar year, can they have the actual installation occur in the next calendar year and still qualify for the benefits that were mentioned?
That is a good question. It will have to be paid for in this calendar year, which generally
Right.
happens at like, so I I can double check, and I would also encourage you to do that. I honestly don't fully know the answer to that question.
Yep.
But I know that it at least has to be fully paid for, and I know for some of the tax credits, it is that it has to be full, like the project has to be fully completed in order for it to count. So yeah, I would have to confirm. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer for you there.
No, that's quite all right. I understand. Thank you.
hmm
That link I provided, if you follow that, it shows each available incentive and it gives a page or two of details that talks about what that your question. And yes, that's true. If you pay for it in this year and the installation is not yet complete, it may, I'm not sure about the here and the home programs, but that link would provide some more information.
Cool beans. Thank you.
Thank you for putting this on. I wish more people were present to take advantage of this, but so the link you're providing for the recording that can be shared with others.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yep. I'll email
Great,
you guys that link and the slides and any resources so they'll be able to watch it there. Yep, absolutely.
great.